Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Women in Politics panel event, which is the third event in the 2022 Women in the Network event series. I am Myja, your Miss Black USA 2021, and I have the pleasure of moderating tonight's panel. And I'm so honored to share the stage with these impactful women. Thank you to all of you all who have been hanging out with us throughout the week. We kicked things off with the Women in Media and Journalism panel, and then we spilled all the real tea with the Women in Real Estate panel. And tonight, you'll get the inside scoop on what it's like to work in the political space. Now, before I turn it over to our lovely panelists, please make sure you keep the chat popping. Toss in who you are, where you're joining from, what you do. If you're feeling something that maybe one of our panelists said, feel free to toss that in the chat as well. Make sure you show love, keep the chat popping. We want to make sure that this is interactive. And then lastly, also toss your questions in the chat, and we will have our panelists do their best to answer them at the end. So now I'm super excited to pass the mic over to our dynamic panelists who will introduce themselves. Miss Joi, let's start with you.
Hey, everyone. Super excited to be on here. I am Joi Zieh. I work for the United States House of Representatives Committee on Homeland Security, where I am one of the clerks for the committee. And I just enjoy being in the space, enjoy working with various people operating. And it's just, working on a Hill is a thing in itself, so.
Love it. All right, Miss Tria, tell us who you are, what you do, company, and what you love about your role.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Tria Stallings. I am a proud Delawarean, and I am the state scheduler for United States Senator Tom Carper. I'm his scheduler / executive assistant. What I love about my job is the fact that I'm able to serve my home state. So this is like a dream come true to me. And I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. I'm super excited to hear from you all. I know you're going to be dropping some gems. Haley, tell us who you are.
Hi, everyone. My name is Halle Ewing. I do legislative affairs for the Vice President. I am her legislative assistant. So I handle all congressional engagement. So any member of Congress, I basically am like their liaison between the Vice President and the office.
Love it. All right, Miss Carissa, tell us who you are.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chrissa J Smith. I will shout out that all of us on this call are actually friends in real life. So I feel like it's good to state it at the top that we are all sisters in different avenues and verticals. So just want to give that shout out. And we've all known each other before these roles that we've taken. But essentially, I serve alongside Haley actually at the White House. I'm in the Office of Public Engagement, serve as a senior advisor focused on women and girls and health. So I see Haley honestly probably daily, which is a blessing. But essentially, my role is doing public affairs and engagement for women and girl stakeholders and healthcare stakeholders. And thank you, Myja, for hosting this.
I love it. Thank you all. And shout out to the Real Housewives of the White House. Okay. All right. So I'm super excited to jump into the conversation. So we are going to keep this moving. First question, I just want to know, how did you get into politics? What led you there? Was this your first decision? How did you get there? Carissa, let's start with you.
Certainly. And sorry, I'm like unmuting from my other device. But essentially, I guess how I got there was through internship opportunities. I was a Congressional Black Caucus Foundation intern. And so essentially Joi is also a part of that program too. We're both alumna of that program. And essentially it just gave, I would speak for both of us. I'm sure Joi could add to this too, but it gave us essentially the tools and the resources to have opportunity on Capitol Hill. It is a program specifically designed for Black students who want to have opportunity to intern on Capitol Hill, and it's funded with housing and money. If being in DC is very expensive, but of course, if you're a student in college, it's definitely very expensive. And so how I got where I was honestly, this great organization looking on Capitol Hill, seeing that there weren't too many people who look like us and making the investment in my trajectory.
Love that. Haley, what about you? How did you end up in politics?
I never thought I would be in politics. I I thought I was going to graduate from college and work in a nonprofit. And my parents, I applied for a job at Legal Aid Society, got that job, and then also applied for just like random jobs in Washington, D.C., because I'd been doing some local government stuff when I was in New York. And I got an internship with then Senator Kamala Harris. And so I was like, my parents were like, you're basically going to make the same amount of money. So you might as well just take the internship and kind of see what happens. And so I took the internship, and then about 2 months in, ended up getting hired. And then the rest is history.
And here you are. Joi, what about you?
So kind of a mixture of Halle and Carissa's. I originally did not plan on just jumping into politics. However, I, like Carissa, sought out an internship. I knew I just wanted to work in government, just not necessarily what space within government. So I did a little more research on the CBCF, as Carissa mentioned, and ended up applying for that internship program. And I got accepted for the fall 2017 cohort. And I was placed in, actually on the Senate side with one of the committees. And then I just stayed. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like you get in and you're like, oh, maybe I can actually do this, you know? And then you get just, you enjoy it, and then you move on to the next thing. And then next thing you know, 5 years later, here we are.
So it sounds like once you do an internship, you just sucked in after that. Tria, what about you? How did you end up in politics?
I would say it was all God. I gotta put that out there, because growing up, I wanted to be a doctor. Like my whole entire life, I was going to go to medical school and prepare. Like when I was at a Votech high school, I was studying biotechnology. Like I really thought that I wanted to be a doctor, but it was just this burning like passion on the inside of me for public speaking. I did not know why I always wanted to be a speaker. Like I always enjoy motivating others, putting my hard work into like really making sure people are okay. So when I was at Delaware State University Hornets, gotta shout out my HBCU, I had a professor where one of the classes was Intro to Political Science. And it was just something about being in that class. I was like, yo, this is something that I really think that I could do. So I changed my major twice when I was an undergrad and eventually became a political science major, and the rest is history. Like everybody said, I started off with the internship, and I've been here ever since. So like you said, Myja, as soon as you get that internship, it's like you don't go too far.
Yeah, you just get sucked right in, right? And then here you are. And so I think each of you have kind of shared your story about, not having politics at the forefront of your mind, or even government at the forefront of your mind, when you were kind of starting that internship. So kind of knowing what you know now, if you could go back, what would you do differently? Or is there something that you wish you would have known before you went into that internship, or before you, kind of decided to pursue a career in politics? Tria, let's start with you.
I would say one thing that I wish I would have known was the importance of advocating for myself. Politics is a place where you have to knock down doors. You have to, say, hey, this is for me. So, I mean, I learned that along the way when I started getting my different jobs in politics, but learning to be okay with advocating for yourself. And it's not a matter of you being boastful, but it's a matter of saying, I deserve to be at this table and I can do what you do, and I probably could do it a little better. Okay. So, and that's on period.
And that's on period, Pooh. Halle, what about you? What would you say you would have done differently, had you known kind of what you know now?
I think I would have stuck to one path. So I think a lot of times in politics, it is hard. It is very hard to move around. So people will try to go from like comms to scheduler to like doing different things. But you don't have, in this industry, you don't have that flexibility, really. You need to kind of go in when you're a staff assistant. So that's really like the entry level role. And kind of that's the time to figure out what you want to do and then follow that path and find like a mentor or someone in the community. And specifically being like a Black woman, there's a lot of like older Black women who have done what I'm doing. So like looking to them for advice and kind of following that path to get to a certain point, because I feel like it is kind of a rigid system in many ways of like, you come in, if you choose the comms route, like it is very hard to change lanes and not do comms and things like that. So I wish I had have known early on, because I think in many ways I was behind because I was jumping around so much in those first few years.
That's very interesting. Good to know. Joi, what about you? Anything you would have done differently or wish you would have known?
Actually, literally what Halle just mentioned, finding my space earlier on. Because as Halle mentioned, there are a lot of different positions, a lot of different ways and paths that you can take. So just taking a little more time to figure out like what my interests are, where do I want to go, like which path do I see myself going down on versus like, I mean, I'm definitely all for getting in a position and figuring out if you like it or not, but sometimes it is a little easier to maybe say, okay, well, if I want to go down this path, these are some of the positions that are within this path that I can explore versus just hopping around, as Halle mentioned. So definitely early on, taking more time to figure out like my space and figure out what area within this area that I want to be in.
Absolutely. Chrissa, what about you? Would you have done something differently or would you have known something earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tria really hit it early on with like advocating for yourself. So when I did the CBCF internship fresh out of college. We're all class of 2016, those of us kind of at the top of this call. And so I did that initial internship right out of college, but then by spring 2017, I hadn't landed a job yet post CBCF immediately. And so it took a little bit of like scrambling because like I thought a job was going to come through, you know, where I was placed and things like that. And I ended up having to like work briefly off the hill at like a nonprofit association that was like, you know, politically focused. But for the most part, I didn't take advantage, I think, of advocating for myself. Like I just thought I was like going to get the job or like they were going to offer me this role. And then they did it. And I was like, oh, okay, well, Mom, either I'm coming home or I got to find a job or I have to just work this restaurant gig until something lands, which is what I did until I found something off the hill. But I think that was my biggest lesson was like, you know, essentially not taking the time to like really have multiple deals on the table and then deciding for myself, maybe at that time, what job I wanted. Like I was so hyper focused on just like this one role, but I really didn't set myself up for success because I literally put all my eggs in that one basket.
Good to know. Very interesting perspective. You know, now we are in the era of Ketanji Jackson, Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, Michelle Obama, you know, these women who are, you know, truly breaking barriers, you know, in the politics space. But I think sometimes the discouraging part is that, you know, Ketanji is the first Black woman to be nominated or confirmed as a Supreme Court justice in over 200 years, right? And same with, you know, Madam Vice President. So, you know, when we think of, you know, their journeys and their experiences, and then kind of relating it and reflecting on your journey and experiences, what challenges have you encountered as a Black woman in the politics space? Chrissa, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think me and Tria have spoken about this. I just think people trying to play you, right? Like when you have the experience, when you have the degrees, it's like, okay, like there is no reason, and I think Tria said it earlier, I can probably do the job better than you at the table. It's like, there's no reason why you shouldn't give me what I'm actually overqualified for. And that's really like, I think kind of the unspoken truth about many of us is that they still often see us, I think in these spaces as behind or lacking. And it's just like the farthest thing from the truth, honestly. And I think, you know, for the most part, a lot of us on this call have to be courageous in, you know, whatever space you're in as a Black woman, but especially in the political space, because we really have to essentially tell ourselves our narrative. And I think that that's the most important thing. Like we couldn't have, you know, honestly, Vice President Harris, if she didn't tell herself her narrative of like, she could be president one day, right? Like we couldn't have Supreme Court Justice Brown Jackson if she didn't tell herself that she is qualified to be on that court. And so I think, you know, some of it is like, those are some of the challenges that I've seen in this space is just we're often overqualified, but then often slotted for roles that are honestly just beneath our worth. And I think that that's unfortunate. And I think it's also up to us, though, at that time to do the pipeline building. You know, if I'm ever going to leave my role, I always say I'm going to fill myself with someone who looks like me, right? Because that makes a big difference because they're not going to seek us out either. And I say that, I say that truthfully, just seeing, how, if we talk about diversity and inclusion. So I think those are just been some of the challenges that I've seen in a lot of the hiring processes, is still like, you can have the resume, you can have the experience, but someone still won't give you the credence as some of our counterparts who are also in those roles.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you said that. And, we've had this, event series throughout this week, and a lot of women have been saying the same thing, right? I know I'm qualified, but folks don't want to give me what I'm worth. Tria, I saw you kind of nodding your head. What challenges, what challenges have you kind of dealt with, in the political space? And, when you think of yourself, as a Black woman in this space?
Yeah, so I would say, I just don't think that there's enough of Black women coming together, like, for instance, on these panels, or, being supportive of one another. I mean, as we know, in the Black community, it's kind of like crabs in a barrel, right? But I mean, it also could be a good thing, because I do know a lot of Black women that will say, hey, you're a sister, let me help you out. Or if you're a part of a sorority, or if you're a part of CBCF, or, I wasn't a part of CBCF, but I know tons of people that still call their colleagues for a job. So I think it's kind of like an unspoken rule when it comes to being a Black woman. Like, there's support, but then at the same time, there's not support. But if you find your circle, or if you find the people that definitely will, be there for you and support you, because it's all about who you know. And that's one thing about politics. You could have a law degree from the best like law program in the country, but that intern could get the job over you. Why? Because that intern was interning for a year, and then they prove themselves. So it's just a matter of being able to say, hey, I deserve a seat at the table, but also finding those people that are in your corner that can vouch for you, because it's really all about who you know.
Yeah. What's the, I think I said this quote yesterday, but it's who you know will get you there, and then what you know will keep you there. So I think it's so important that you mention that. Joi, what about you? Talk about some of the challenges you've kind of encountered. And I know your story is a little bit different, as it relates to politics. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so challenges. I agree with everything Carissa said and Tria said. A lot of the times, like, when we get in these spaces, we just want to be there. So sometimes it's like we don't advocate for ourselves to the extent of which we should, because we want to be in this space. So I think it was Tria or Carissa said, so we'll just take the job and then try to figure it out on the way. But even and then sometimes we get too comfortable not advocating for ourselves that we get stuck in like the same job, or we get stuck in the same routine. Because a lot of the times it's not a lot of people that look like us. Sometimes we're the only Black person in our offices. So even in then, that's a challenge in itself. Advocating for yourself, being the only Black person in your office, and even just like not getting so stuck in a certain position or a certain path because your boss or whomever don't see the potential that you have. I see that a lot of times, especially with like younger people coming on the Hill, because they just want to be there. So sometimes they get stuck, and it's a challenge, especially when like offices don't put in the work to promote or put in the work to even mentor or like cultivate you to do better, to be better, even if it's not in that office, whatever the next role you're going to be in. A lot of the time, offices don't take that space or take the time to do that with younger people. So that in itself is a challenge. Like Tria said, finding your community, finding mentors, that definitely helps. But even in then, sometimes people are shy or like all of the above. So sometimes it's challenging just to step out of your shell to advocate for yourself, or to meet people, or to form these communities.
Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff. Interesting perspective. Haley, what about you? What challenges have you kind of encountered, along your journey and as a Black woman?
I would say, along with just advocating for myself, is really imposter syndrome. I mean, a lot of times we get in these roles, you're fully qualified to be in that role, and yet you still feel inferior, right? And I think that this is just kind of a common like thread between Black women. I mean, I even see it with my own boss, right? So it's like, it doesn't matter where you are, we always feel that. Just being a woman in general, I think in the workspace, you feel that. And there's like tremendous pressure. A lot of times I know with my job, I have pressure every day to make sure events are right and dealing with, 100 personalities every single day. And so doing all of that, it's like I oftentimes question whether or not I'm doing it correctly. I feel like I have to like second guess myself. And like, I want to read every email to our director. And it's like, no, you know the information, you know what you're doing. And so like, honestly, like sitting here coaching myself and like words of affirmation every day before every trip, it's like you have been preparing for this. I prepare for trips for about a week before we actually go on them. And it's like, you've been preparing for this for a week. You know what you're doing. Nobody's going to boss you around. Like, you've got this. And so just really kind of putting myself in that headspace. And it's been a journey, and it's something I'm still trying to figure out, something I still am working on every day. Just really learning how to, feel confident in like all of the skills that I've learned over the course of the like 4 years that I've been in the political space now.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to mention that, and I love what you said, Haley, about pressure, right? And I think it's so important for us to know that it's okay to make mistakes, because I feel like that as well. And sometimes, in my role, and sometimes, we have this idea of imposter syndrome, which is kind of connected to perfectionism, if you think about it, in a way. And the thing is, like, you don't have to be perfect to be qualified, right? Like mistakes are to be made because, that's how you learn. You don't learn from success, right? Like, you learn from mistakes. So I think it's so important that you mentioned that. And I love how each of you have kind of talked about, just like advocating for yourself, in this space. And so what would you say is one thing that you have done that has truly elevated you to be where you are today, or to be in the role that you are today, or that's helping you to get to where you want to be? Haley, let's start with you.
So I will say, I started out, our in our Senate office, we had about 40 people. We had 5 staff assistants. So it's like bottom of the totem pole in terms of office, like hierarchy. And I quite literally did anything that people asked. So that comes from doing like the flag requests that come in from constituents to like fly their flag over the Capitol, to cleaning out the fridge every Friday, to picking up my boss's lunch, to walking people's dogs, and then like doing my actual job, which was like our like whole approval process for legislation. But regardless, I still did everything. And so because of that, I moved up a lot quicker than my peers that were fine with just answering the phone and like sorting the mail. And so when it came to transition time, and so we were, it was high stakes, everybody's trying to find jobs. And even though I worked in our Senate office, it wasn't guaranteed that I got a job in the vice president's office. And so there was a lot of people that ended up not getting jobs and going to various agencies or going to different Senate offices, whatever the case may be. But I had the tools to be able to say, and the resources, because I'd worked with so many people, to be able to advocate for myself to get a job. And so that's how I ended up getting into legislative affairs. And I honestly think if I didn't just do every single job under the sun and know how to do everybody else's job, I wouldn't be in the place that I was today. But I quite literally tried to learn everyone else's job, and it worked out.
Haley, that is so powerful, because honey, that might be something I'm gonna have to work on, is doing all those things. But it's so important, right? Like when you go above and beyond, and people see that. But I think it's also important to know that you're in a place where people actually see that and value that.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's very, very, very important. Tria, what about you? What is something you feel has you've done that's elevated you in your role, or gotten you this new role, or is going to get you to where you want to be?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, it's leaning on, I keep talking about this, but leaning on my circle and my community, because there's days where I may not feel like myself and they like, do you know who you are? Like, do you know what you've achieved? Like, let me remind you how far you've come, or let me remind you, you know, what you have achieved being a Black woman. So I think it's very important to have those people in your corner that will be honest with you when you have moments of self-doubt, or be honest with you when you have moments where you mess up, because a lot of times I feel like we can be our own worst critics. As we know, as women, you know, it could be one little mistake that's so small could turn into this like whole thing, like, oh, I'm not doing a good job, like maybe I'm not qualified. But really having that sense of community and like Black sisters, as we're all on this screen, we all encourage each other. We've all been there before. So it's really important to make sure that you have people that love you and genuinely support you. So when you're in those holes or those dark places, they can help you. And not saying that you need that, right? Because I mean, you don't need you don't need someone to tell you how amazing you are. That's not what I'm saying. But the importance of having people that love you, that can help you when you go through tough times.
I love that. A support system, you know, and reminding yourself. And that goes back to imposter syndrome, is having to, you know, come back and remind yourself of who you are. Real quick, I just want to share this story. One of my favorite scriptures is Mark 9:23. And it's this man, and he comes to Jesus and asks Jesus, I believe, to heal his child. But he says, you know, Jesus, can you heal my child if you can? And Jesus said, if I can. And that anytime I'm doubting myself, I go back to that scripture to remind myself, if. And I just laugh and I go back to what I'm doing. But Chrissa, let's hop over to you. What is something that you do, or that you cherish, or, you know, that you maybe say to yourself that, you know, has elevated you to get to where you are?
Yeah. I think some of it has to just do with like relationships. I think Tria said it best. Like, I think everything is about like who you know, not just in politics, but in everything in life, because you just never know who you're going to cross paths with, and how you engage with others. You know, people are always observing and watching. And so I think for me, you know, I've always like just strived in this space to kind of like be the best I can be. But then also I think essentially, you know, bring others in. Halle knows this, that like I try to organize a lot of the Black Women 46, and like I'm always like trying to boost people up or affirming people in the group chat, things like that. And we have like this group called Black Girl 46, and it is solely for the purpose of like highlighting what Black women are doing across the admin. But then also we like get together and do like community building. Because on top of that, I think not only are we coming together to kind of affirm each other, but it's like, oh, that job is open. Okay, sis, like, let me put you on. Or, oh, okay, like I'm leaving my job. Can I have your resume? Like, I literally have sent texts like that, you know, across the admin, or to people like, you know, like, I know of this opening, send me your resume. Are you interested? And so I think that has like really propelled me to where I am, is just having like a community building mindset in all of this, and not just being so singular focused on my career, because the reality is that all these careers are seasonal for the most part. And when you accept that, and when you accept that it is only for a season, you have to think beyond that of like, what is the legacy that you're building? What is the community that you're building? Because I can take my sisters with me, right? Like wherever I go, I can't take this title with me. That business card is going to expire. That email is going to get shut down when I leave this place. So I think some of that has like propelled me definitely forward in the way I think about my career. I think a professional skill set too is just honestly being detail oriented. And when I say that, I think a lot of that just comes down to a lot of like what I would say specifically what me and Halle do is literally we have to be detail oriented about external people. So the people who essentially have, as we say, issue areas or kind of like discussion topics that they want the vice president to know, the president to know, things that they're, you know, what their whole organization or what they're focused on is like a lot of that is like for us to kind of be essentially detail oriented subject matter experts. And I think that has just gone a long way in the work product is like, okay, if someone asks me a question of like, okay, like I know that essentially Planned Parenthood is responsible for X, Y, and Z. They organize in these type of states. This is their president. This is their VP of the organization. And so I feel like that has been like a real key piece is just like having that knowledge and taking the time to just learn the external relationships. So just being detail oriented with that and handling them with care. The same way I handle the actual community of sisters I roll with too.
Come on, community of sisters. I love that. You know, and I the perspective of, you know, the roles being seasonal, you know, I think, you know, we can talk about that in a general sense, right? Just thinking beyond, you know, your role and how you're building your legacy, right? Because if you're establishing that LLC, if you're establishing that, you know, community of sisters, if you're establishing that blog, Joy, if you are establishing, you know, content that you're creating or whatever it is outside of your role, you're building your brand once that email expires, right? Once that business card expires. So I really love that perspective. So Joy, let me toss it over to you. What is one thing you feel like you've done that has helped you elevate, that has helped you progress, that you feel is going to get you to where you want to be?
I definitely agree with the community, building community, establishing relationships. I'll also add to make it known what you're interested in. It's good to have the connections. It's good to have the community, but if they don't know what you're interested in, sometimes it's hard for them to help you. So, and it goes back to advocating for yourself, just being able to, like, in these settings, let them know, like, hey, just putting it out there, I'm interested in blah, 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 blah. If you see anything, or like, if you know of somebody that you could connect me with, or even any positions, I just want you to know that these are my interests, or like, this is what I desire. So just being able to do that and people knowing what you're interested in. So like, that's a lot of how, like, the positions I've ended up in. My community of people knew what I was looking for or knew what I was interested in. So when something came up, they were like, oh yeah, I remember Joy told me so and so and so. And they're like, hey, I saw so. Is it something you're interested in? So that definitely is like something that'll help you throughout this journey, building those connections in that network and then letting them know your interest. That has definitely pretty much brought me where I am now.
Yeah, you know, and I think the theme for tonight, I know we keep talking about this, right? It's advocating for yourself, right? Advocating for that influence, advocating for that power, you know, the ability to use your voice, the ability to have a seat at the table, fighting for, you know, a seat at the table, or even creating our own tables. So when we think of this idea of advocating for self and having a seat at the table, what does that look like for you? Joy, let's start with you. What does it mean, you know, to have a seat at the table in this space?
Well, to have a seat at the table for me means to be in a space where we are building the table. I don't want to just bring my chair to the table. I want to be in the same room where the table is being built. So that mindset for me is like being in these spaces when these decisions are being made, being in these positions where that's like, okay, I'm a legislative assistant in this office, and this is my community, or this is my district. This is a predominantly Black district. Respectfully, someone who didn't grow up in a space like that can't advocate or can't say, like, these are the type of changes that we need. So just being in those rooms and being in those places where legislation is being made, or like where the change actually happens, I think that's one of the most important parts. And of course, like, having a seat at the table is just a cherry on top. Being able to, when these spaces are established and Black women are in the middle of establishing it, bringing on more Black women to sit at the table that's already established, and having those voices and being who we need, like, in these spaces and in these rooms. Sometimes that's literally the space that we're in, like being the only Black person or the only Black woman. We carry that load of understanding what our community needs and being in that space and advocating for them.
Yeah, I love that. Like, I want to be in the room where the table is being built.
Okay.
So that's where the voice and the influence and the power is. Halle, what about you? What does it mean, you know, for you to have a seat at the table in this space?
For me, it means doing my work and doing it well and being compensated for that work and properly compensated for that work. I think a lot of times as Black women in politics, we are undervalued, underappreciated. It's something I've dealt with my entire career in politics, and something I still actively am always trying to overcome. And I think I'll know that I've made it when I come into a job and people are like, this is what the job offer is. And that I feel like is my worth, right? I feel like in many ways, right, we can say what we want. I mean, we're doing so much for, like, America, right? Just as a whole. But I do think there's something to be said, right, about also taking care of yourself. And a lot of times something I struggle with is not taking care of myself in my current position and just in politics in general. And so I will know that I have a seat at the table, but I can find a balance between the two, right? And I can take care of myself while still helping the American people, because obviously all of us have chosen to have careers in public service, but we are still people. And we still need to practice self-care and self-love. And so that's something that I just am always kind of preaching.
Yeah, Haley, I appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing that. And it's important to show, those sides, right? Because like you said, we're here because this is our passion. We want to save the world, but saving the world costs money. And mm-hmm. our money, the money that we need to pay bills and pay for gas and air conditioning and rent.
And it always seems so glamorous, right? Like, I think there's a lot of like glamour to like specifically like a White House job, right? I am well aware that my job seems very glamorous. I get to fly on the plane with the VP, and I get to be on like the Senate floor when Justice Jackson gets confirmed by the Senate, and like all of these really fun, amazing milestones. But there's so much that goes on behind the scenes, and there's so much preparation and time, and you have to give so much of yourself in this space. And we don't have the same flexibility that like you'll hear people in like the tech world say, right? Who have like unlimited PTO and get to like work from home 3 days a week and have their lunches paid for. Like, we don't have that, right? And so there's so much time and effort that you have to put in, and it's like, you just need to also take care of yourself, and you need to just work towards that. Because I think there is a balance that can be found in politics. But, I'm still just striving to try to find that. But there's many of my like mentors, they have found that. And that's how you have it like longevity within this role.
I love that. Yeah. And I can appreciate that authentic experience. Tria, what about you? What does it look like for you to have a seat at the table?
Yeah, just one thing that I want to mention is the importance of being yourself. I believe that we're all placed in these roles so we can make an impact, right? But one of the things that I found, even with my internships and being in the beginning of my career, like, it's okay to be me. Like, I'm a very silly person. I love to smile. I love to make other people feel good about themselves. So of course, being appropriate and professional, but allowing your personality to shine, allowing you to be you so you can be unique, so you can stand out. And that one time of you saying hello to, a senator could end up with you being his chief of staff in 2 years. Like, it's just, being a nice person goes a very, very long way in politics. And the political world is large, but it's very small, because a lot of people have worked with the same people before. Like, there's people that I know in one office that will know people that I've never even knew that they knew. So I think it's very important to be yourself, but also remember that you don't want to burn bridges, because when you burn bridges in politics, it's very, very hard to heal those wounds.
Yeah, that's so important. So important to know. All right, Chrissa, what about you? What does it mean for you to have a seat at the table with your community assistants?
Yes. I feel like I'm a summarize. I'm gonna keep it short. I ain't gonna go into my Pentecostal long overview. But I'm gonna keep it short. I ain't gonna do 3 points, 1 point. I will say that I think having a seat at the table, I think being authentically you, I feel like I heard that from Tria. I think, essentially knowing who you are. I think also as well, I think having a seat at the table, I would say personally for me, is just honestly looking at the table and seeing where the holes are, right? So I feel like earlier you said it right, Myja, like, we couldn't have had like a Michelle Obama if Barack wasn't like, oh gosh, like, I need to go run and like really become the first Black president, right? Like, we couldn't have, VP Harris, had she not, as the only second Black woman sitting senator, gone and ran for president and decide like, I'm at the level of everyone else, at this table, essentially. Same with, I recently confirmed amazing judge is, her essentially seeing that there was actually not a seat at the table that looked like her. No one seated in a seat that looked like her. So I think some of it too is looking to see some of these spaces where we aren't, and then being willing to be the first, because if someone has to be willing to be the first. And I think that is one thing that like I was reminded of, last week watching the judge's confirmation, also just seeing others, is that someone has to go and just be the first. And so I think for me, that has been like an eye opener, is like, never be afraid of being the first. And I think it's like, once you get to that table, then it's like, okay, let's pull up 3 more sisters who look like me to this table. But I'm glad that I wasn't afraid to go step into that table by myself. Even in the current office that I work in, I am the only like Black woman senior advisor. And then the only other Black woman that we have is, someone we consider what we call it kind of junior role. And she serves as our special assistant to the director of that office. And so it's kind of like also too, like being comfortable with knowing like you are like essentially the only one. Like Haley right now is the only one in her particular office as well. And so it's like just not being afraid every day to still show up, to know who you are, to come authentically, and not have imposter syndrome keep you from that seat at that table that probably doesn't look like us.
I love that. Never be afraid of being the first. And, it's a tough job. I'm sure it's hard. It's difficult. And I can only imagine. I mean, we saw the hearings, right, of Kataji sitting in those rooms, and they just, going at her as a Black woman. We saw that. So, it's definitely not an easy thing to do. But like you said, never be afraid, of being the first. I love that. So I do have one more question, but I want to kind of toss it over to our audience, because we do have some questions in the chat. And then if we have more time, I'll ask the last one. But Ms. Jessica said, how can one transition into a political career from another career? Do you have any tips for campaigning, networking, or just being successful in politics? And anybody can kind of jump in and answer.
I'll say use us. I am very big at cold emailing. If there's someone in a specific office, a space that I'm interested in, or even like a career path, LinkedIn, a career path that I desire, or I'm like, oh, this is interesting, or, oh, I just want to hear your experience. I just want to hear your take. I cold email people all the time, and especially people on the Hill, they want to talk about themselves. They want to brag. They want everyone to know. So one thing I will say is don't be afraid to like cold email. I'm sure even us here on this panel, like we're happy to help where we can. But even just reaching out, if you have connections on LinkedIn or anything, just reaching out. And sometimes I would say take it as far as, if you're in the area, if there's a specific office and the office is open and welcome to visitors, just going in and introducing yourself, getting to know the staff assistant or whomever, and that's the first step. That'll lead you to maybe a coffee, that'll lead you to another connection and another connection. So that's my 2 cents.
Anybody else want to jump in on this? All right, we'll go to our next question. Ms. Jalen said, does anyone have advice for a young Black woman looking to run for mayor of Philadelphia?
Well, I'll jump in here first. I'll just say the best thing you could do is like go after the vision the Lord has given you. So if you have this desire in your heart, all you could do is step out there and do it, right? Like I think the biggest thing about campaigning is, one, to know why you're doing it. But then the second thing is to have fun, right? Because along the way, you're going to meet people, you're going to develop great skills. You're going to essentially be able to still bond with your community in a unique way. And honestly, I think running for office is one of the more courageous things you can do as a public servant, honestly, is essentially putting yourself on display. So I think my only advice would be honestly to do it, and then also to have fun while doing it. And it's okay if you don't know everything. It's okay if you don't have every connection. A lot of that stuff will flow and come to you, but you have to just also be willing to, as my grandma would say, step off the porch.
Child, come on off the porch now. Okay, so next question. Thank you for that, Carissa. That was great. And this goes back to Ms. Jessica's question that she asked about transitioning into a political career. How do you establish relationships, when you're transitioning from into politics from a different career? I'll
go first. Sorry. I will say this. I guess in the beginning you asked this and I didn't answer this. When I was in college, I thought I wanted to do broadcast journalism. So actually my first couple internships were in radio. So like my first internship was like WPGC here in DC. I like interned with them like 2 to 3 times thinking I was gonna have a radio show. And you know, I like interned for like a local news affiliate. And so essentially I had nothing that I thought was related to politics. But when I first interned for WPGC, I actually was working for the woman who was their director of community affairs. So she actually was doing essentially kind of what we call the stakeholder engagement or the public affairs piece on behalf of the radio station. So if the Boys and Girls Club in Southeast was holding like, you know, a carnival outside, she was coordinating like essentially the radio personalities to go out there and to be present. And so I remember thinking like, oh, like this is politics, like this is community building, this is like community engagement. And that's when I found out at the radio station about CBCF because a former intern there went and did CBCF on the Hill. And so interestingly enough, I was able to transfer those contacts, even though it was like only 2 contacts, I had the right contacts at that radio station to essentially recommend me to go do the CBCF internship, which is how I got accepted. So I would just say be open to the one connection as well. Sometimes you don't need all of them. I know that DC is a very transactional place, but you really sometimes only just need the right person to speak your name into the room. And that has always been the case. I think in my life, I've been blessed to have that. I feel like, you know, I always try to pay it forward and do the same for somebody else of like, let me say their name because to put them at the top of the mind of this hiring opportunity. So I would say that that would be my best advice is don't feel so stressed out about having all the contacts because that one contact could just be the right contact to set you up.
Carissa, we're going to get you a radio show called Community of Sisters. Did anyone else want to talk about that question or answer that question about building relationships?
I'll jump in just really quick. This is amazing. Okay, Myja, thank you for doing this. But just to piggyback off of what Carissa said, like you don't have to have a million people that are in your corner. If you have 1, 2, or 3 people that are willing to vouch for you, willing to say, hey, you know, I know that she's a hard worker. I know that she's on time. I know that she, whatever task she's given, she always does it 100 and above. Like it's so important. So don't think of it as the amount of people that you have in your corner, but just think of it as that one person can open the door to so many people. And we know the Bible tells us that promotion comes from God. So if it's your time for a promotion, you're going to get it. So it's not a matter of who's going to do it. We know that it's, well, I'm a born again believer. So I believe that God is the one that gives me my promotion, but the Bible tells us that promotion comes from God. So I truly believe that when it's your time and nobody can stop it. And it's going to happen because I've gotten job opportunities from people that I didn't even know knew me. So it's very important to just hold on to the people that love you and that support you, because those are the people that are going to be there. And when you blow up and become the mayor of Philadelphia, you're going to be able to help another Black girl behind you. Okay.
Yeah, we are claiming Miss Jalen gonna be the next mayor of Philadelphia. We're gonna say she was on the Women in panel event. Yes. No, but that's so important. You know, when we think about sponsorship, right? Like you both said, it's like having somebody in rooms that you don't have access to speaking your name. That is so important. But you got to surround yourself with the right people and the right Black women. You know, because like you said, sometimes we can kind of be in that crabs in a barrel mindset. So get around people who want to see you win, who want to see you be the mayor of Philadelphia and want to see you start your radio show called Community of Sisters. Okay, we got a really good question from Miss Nabila. Hey, Nabila. She said, what self-care tips do you recommend while working high demanding jobs? That's really good. Shall I get you a glass? No, I'm just kidding.
I'll start.
Go ahead, Haley.
I would say my number one thing is building a community outside of politics that you can go to and hang out with. I think it's a very insular community. Everybody kind of knows each other. I came in on the Hill. Most of my friends were on the Hill. Most of my friends were in politics. And sometimes you just need to shut off and like have people that don't care really what your job is at all. Don't want to have any sort of like networking event with you. It's just to hang out, right? And whatever hanging out means for you. But I have like a group of friends that I hang out with all the time. And it's like after a stressful day's work, like right before this panel, one of my friends is like, do you want to go for a walk? I'm like, yeah, why not? You know, and so it's like doing things like that and just kind of shutting off. I'm like, I always have 3 phones with me. It's like, no, putting those phones away after setting up boundaries of like, my boundary is usually about 10 p.m., which I think some people think is kind of late, but honestly, it's pretty early. Like that's a pretty early time. So any email after 10, if it's not like immediate, I'm not answering it, and just setting up those things for myself. And like I said, I'm still working on it. This is still very much a work in progress in my life. But we're getting there. And I think one of my biggest things is just having that outside friend group and then setting up my boundaries with like my time and just realizing, that I'm allowed to take that time.
Yeah, I love that. Anyone else wanted to? And Haley, I would love to take walks, but I live 45 minutes. So it'll be like a 45-minute drive, then a walk. But we can schedule walks.
Let's schedule one. Who
else wanted to? I know somebody came off mute. Joy, go ahead.
Haley, that's actually exactly what I was going to say. Boundaries. Boundaries are like boundaries, set boundaries to the extent, of course, like getting into a new space, you learning yourself, learning the space, learning the needs, the requirements, learning the demands, and even learning your needs. What do you need in order to be successful in this position or in this space? What type of time do you need for yourself in order to produce the quality of work that they demand of you? So I definitely think setting boundaries, figuring out doable boundaries and setting boundaries and sticking to them will help you. It's the sticking to them part. Mm-hmm.
It's the sticking to them part. Okay, so listen, we got about 5 minutes left, and I have a really good question. I need each of you to give me 30 to 60 seconds of the best advice you have for someone who may be either transitioning into politics, who just aspires to be in the political space. Chrissa, let's start with you.
I think, okay, sorry. Well, I took more than 10 seconds already. Hold on. Let me get the time clock back. Run it back. Run it back. Okay. I think the best advice that I got was actually working recently on the SCOTUS nomination team. We were a part of just doing the public engagement for her and lining up validators for her. And there's a woman who came specifically as an advisor to come into the White House to help us with this process. And so essentially one day we were just talking, and what she said to me was like, this building is not your destiny. And I think that was the best advice that I could receive in politics, because just like anything else, as we talked about, those emails expires, those business cards become outdated. It's like just knowing that none of these places per se, they're so transactional, they're so seasonal, especially us who work in politics. We either have a job if we're in the majority, as we say, or if our member lost, something has happened to them, we don't know, they resign. We are really living on the edge when it comes to these jobs, essentially. So I would just say that is my best advice, is like knowing that these positions and things necessarily aren't your destiny. And I love what both my two sisters on this call said before, of like setting those boundaries, because there's other things that are going to cultivate you and fill you up. For me, that's like church. For me, that's like roller skating. That's like dancing. And I think just having that, essentially also too, at the level where you see your professional career is also important. So having that balance of also cultivating who you are holistically outside of these roles that, people deem your destiny, because we know that we are so much more than that, especially as women.
Yeah, that might be my mantra for tomorrow. Honey, this building in my house is not your destiny. All right, Haley, 60 seconds. Best advice for someone looking to get into politics.
Be true to yourself, follow, really don't be afraid to go after what you want in politics. Don't be afraid, just because, as we've said, just because there's no other Black woman in that role doesn't mean that you can't do that role, and be confident in yourself and your capabilities and know your worth.
Love it. Love it. Know your worth. All right, Miss Joy, best advice.
60 seconds, 30 seconds. Oh my gosh. Okay. Learn yourself early, learn who you are, learn what you are capable of, learn your skills, and learn how to vocalize those skills, and learn how to speak in 30, 60 seconds, like who you are, what you're capable of. And I would also say, just be you, be authentically yourself. Like Tria was saying, these positions, these roles, like, you're in it for a reason. if there are 10 people in that office, all 10 of y'all should not be the same person. So just be who you are. God strategically placed you in this position for a reason. Like, you carry something that office or that space needs. So be that, like, let that shine. I know sometimes it's hard, like once you get in, or especially if this is like your first opportunity, or you're just trying to establish yourself, that you tend to, you know, what's the saying they say? Fake it till you make it. And like, put yourself to the side. But I would actually say be who you are, like show yourself, learn yourself, and be able to early on, like speak for yourself, advocate for yourself. And advice, I would say, like, don't be afraid. I think Haley just mentioned, don't be afraid to go for it. Don't be afraid to send a cold email. Don't be afraid to apply for a job, even if you think you're not qualified for it. Like, the worst they can say is no. Next. So I would just say, don't be afraid to go after what you want, like Haley mentioned.
I love that. I saw this post. It was like, stop disqualifying yourself. Apply for the role anyway and let them reject you, or let them disqualify you, but don't disqualify yourself. All right, Miss Tria, take us home. Best advice.
Okay, best advice. I would say, like Nike, just do it. Because I'm telling you, like, I didn't think when I was coming into politics, I was like, I don't think there's any politicians like me. Like, I don't think there's anybody that's nice. Like, I don't, because people think that everybody in politics is mean or is out to get people, but there are people that are genuinely like supportive. There are people that will have your back. So just do it. And even though I was being funny when I said it, I'm being serious too. Just do it. You can do it. You have what it takes, and we need you. So if you're questioning yourself, step out on faith and know that God has you and you can do it. You have what it takes. And there are people that are like you. You just have to find them.
I love that. Just do it. All right. I'm gonna run for mayor now. I need y'all to be my campaign team and get all the support and the funding. Okay, ladies, before we let you go, can y'all toss y'all's Instagram handles in the chat so all the wonderful ladies can follow you? And I'm gonna say this, please go ahead and hop in their DMs with your questions. Follow them, stalk their pages, harass them. This is networking right here. And these women are, I know each of them personally, and I know that they are so willing to help. So panelists, please drop your Instagrams in the chat so that they can follow you. And I think they follow back. So hopefully they'll follow y'all back. They superstars. So we don't know.
Well, before we close out, Queen Myja, can we give you a round of applause? Thank you for putting this together. We got to thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's it, y'all. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you. You guys have been so dynamic, so impactful, so awesome. These conversations are so inspiring, even for me. That's what I said. I'm thinking about the whole mayor route. So I'll keep you posted with the mayor route. But yes, and thank you to our audience, each of our ladies and gentlemen who joined us tonight. I hope that something here that was said, inspired you, impacted you in some way, to take that next step in your journey. And thank you. Have an amazing evening, and hopefully you'll join us tomorrow for our last event to Women in Law. But yes, everybody have a great night, and thank you. Panelists, could y'all stay on just for a few seconds? I'm gonna play my outro music. It's the same. Thank y'all for coming.